Welcome. Welcome, everyone. On behalf of ALC, Amistad, and Let's Get Free, welcome to the We Free Us webinar, where we're going to talk about the commutation process in PA and specifically share details about the very successful Free Mechie campaign. As I'm sure everyone on this call knows, Marie Mechie Scott's life sentence was commuted earlier this year. Yay. Feel free to clap. Um, and in December is when she'll be eligible for parole. So she's not home yet, but in December she'll be eligible for parole. My name is Connie Warren, and I'm the Communications Director at ALC. And tonight I'll be sharing hosting duties with Jules from Amistad Law Project. So why, let's just go into a little bit of the why. Why did we feel it was important to do this? Number one, we wanted to share information on the commutation process, which has changed many times over the years. It's very complicated. We just want to give people a better understanding of the process. So that's one of our goals today. But the ultimate goal in sharing all of the information that we're going to share tonight is to galvanize our movement so we can help bring more people home. And so one of the things that we're going to do tonight is give specifics on what worked and how different parts of our movement came together and collaborated on the tactics that came together to build the pressure campaign that was the Free Mechie campaign. And also, we just want to take a moment and take some of this time to celebrate the win. It's really important to acknowledge all of the work from so many people in our movement who fought to make this happen, and all of the years and years and years of work and sacrifice that went into this. So some of you may have just heard about the Free Mechie campaign earlier this year, but this work, the ground work for this win has been laid over many, many years. Um, and I don't see her in the room, but I know that Hope, Michi's daughter, will be joining us, and she'll be available to answer any questions later. And then we're also going to hear from the woman of the hour herself, Mechie, who has a very special message to share. And to set the tone for tonight, just want to quote Fannie Lou Hamer, nobody's free until everybody's free. That's why we're all here. That's why we do what we do. And thank you so much for being here. And I'm going to just a little housekeeping, and then I'm going to pass the mic to Jules. So we are recording this webinar so that those who can't attend can still access this information. We'll be emailing the link to everyone who registered so that you can share with people you know. With that in mind, we welcome you to turn on your camera if you like, but please keep yourselves muted. Throughout the webinar, we invite you to use the chat to share any questions you have. We have some time reserved at the end for questions, and we want to make sure that we can get to as many of those as possible. So with that being said, I'm going to pass the mic to Jules Rogers.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jules, and I lead communications at Amistad Law Project. And I'm just delighted to be here with you tonight. I live tweet every merit review and public hearing from Amistad's social media channels. And I'm just like really happy to see so many people interested in this particular topic and in the fight to bring folks home from prison. I'm going to introduce our panelists in one moment, but want to start by saying that the leader in the fight to free Mechie has been Mechie herself. Hundreds of people rallied around her to call the governor, to write the Board of Pardons, write news stories about her, and blast the call to free Mechie on social media, among many other things. But the reason so many people moved to action for her was because she has been organizing us for the last 50 years. She's been mentoring women inside, trans people inside, and she's made herself available to all kinds of people out here who have been interested in wanting to get involved in this movement or just connect with her in any way. So we just want to start by grounding everyone in the fact that our movements out here are birthed behind prison walls, and Mechie is one of the mothers of this movement. So it's just so like such a big celebration to get to welcome her home soon. You will get to hear a message from her in just a moment. But first, I want to introduce our panelists for this evening because we're going to just jump right in after Michi's message. You'll hear from Sabira Williams, my colleague at Amistad. She is our staff attorney, and she's been walking with clients through the commutation process for years now. So she's going to give a brief introduction to commutation. And then we will move into a broader conversation with legal experts from the Abolitionist Law Center in Amistad. So we'll have the icons, Brett Grody, the legal director of ALC, and Rupali Rashatwar, who is a staff attorney at ALC, and they are Michi's counsel. And then Sabir Williams will also be joining them for a conversation about movement lawyering. Then we'll move into organizing. We'll hear from Etta Cetera, who's a co-founder of Let's Get Free, the Women and Trans Prisoner Defense Committee, and a longtime organizer to end death by incarceration in Pennsylvania. Etta will be joined by Sam Liu, the Philly Jails organizer at ALC, and also an all-around force for abolitionist organizing in Philly and beyond. Connie and I will then jump in with a few notes on strategic communications and how that amplified the legal advocacy and organizing efforts to free Michi. And we'll open up for questions from you all. So feel free to just be holding on to those and bring those to us all at the end. And hope Michi's daughter is going to be able to jump in as well during that part, which we're looking forward to. With that, thank you for being here. And we'll hear a word from Michi to kick us off.
My name is Marie Scott. I was born with that name, but since I've been in prison, my name has been changed to Mechie. My friends call me Mechie. The police call me Marie Scott. So if you want to know me, call me Mechie.
Why do some people call you Mama Meech?
Because that's what I've become to a lot of women in here. I'm older than them. I grew up in here, so those that, were under me or seen me knew me as a mother figure. I didn't want to become a mother figure because I wasn't able to become a mother to my daughter for being in here, So I hated the idea that somebody else dared to call me mother. I felt like it was taken from my daughter. But God seen the need for them to call me that and kept saying, Mom, I didn't even tell them to call me that. But I guess I was just like a mother to them. And every night we'd have prayer circle and we'd pray. And they noticed that they didn't get in any trouble the next day while praying the night before, and they loved that because they felt the spirit in it, and that's what I want to do. I want to reach people's spirits and talk to their spirit from there so they will really get to believe what I'm telling them when I speak. It's very important that they believe. I don't speak for nothing. I don't talk for nothing, but that's how Mama Meech got her name. And I guess I'll die with being Mama Meech because so many people know me out in the street. They call me that, That was mind blowing. The support that I had, the support that I seen looking at newspaper articles, seeing my daughter on the front page, people coming up to tell me, I see your daughter on the front page of the Philadelphia Daily News. What's going on? And I said, I'm trying to go home. But by this time, I'm saying I am going home because once I heard it in my ear, God saying, you're going home. And I felt that that's what he actually said. I took that on and went with it. I was no longer saying, and I'm trying to get out. I was saying, I'm getting out. And the next thing I know, I had a flood of support. Y'all were showing me videotapes of senators and people that were speaking to the governor on my behalf. And I'm like, oh my God, this is powerful. It was like a flood of people that came together, and I think it shook it shook the Bureau of Corrections. I can tell you that much. It shook the Bureau of Corrections. Women lifers are in the shadows. they don't have the support that men do. Women always run to men to help them. That's not the same way all the time for women to get that help from men. But when you have a force as powerful as all of y'all, then it doesn't matter, male or female. They're not looking at the gender. You know what I'm saying? They're looking at the force. And that's very important for the Board of Pardons to see that we have that kind of force, because they understand now I can't just say anything or do anything without having to be responsible for what I say and do to this applicant. Because there's a force outside in the public that's showing this, and people are watching, people are listening, and people are going to be upset if you do something that isn't warranted, and they will show you that, this can't happen no more the way it's been happening in the past. We have a new force that came, and the way y'all came, it was like a freight train for my commutation. It was like a freight train. And I couldn't even keep up with it. You know what I'm saying? I couldn't even keep up with it. Y'all were just so powerful that I know the board of Pardons was in awe, because they'd never seen anything like it, and they said that. Wow. So that's very important for this to continue for us. I came out screaming. My roommate was there at the window, so she knew. But then when she started screaming, everybody else knew. When they started screaming, the people across the street knew. It just went from unit to unit. And I was so overjoyed, so overjoyed by it. And now I know what they mean when they say words cannot describe something. You know what I'm talking about? You've heard that saying before, right? And now I know what they meant. There was not even an expression that I could have picked that would have brought out and made you understand or feel what I felt. You know what I'm saying? Probably understood that I'm going home. This 71-year-old lady is going home. Not back to my cell, but I'm going home. And I want the world to know that I am one of the most repetitive individuals you'll ever run across for what I did. But that's not me. That's what I did, but it's not me today. And I'm going to show the world who I really am and what I can really do to give back to the society from which I took from and the family.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sabira Williams. I'm the staff attorney with Amistad Law Project. I will start off by saying we are overwhelmingly, overjoyed by Mechie and her being granted commutation. I did have the opportunity to assist with preparing her for her public interview with the Board of Pardons. So, we couldn't be more happier for her. I will start tonight with speaking about the commutation process as a whole. I'm pretty sure many of you here tonight know that commutation is a reduction of a sentence by the governor of Pennsylvania with the approval of the Board of Pardons. And so what that means is that basically you have to go through the Board of Pardons first before you can have your recommendation sent or approved by the governor. The members of the board are the Lieutenant Governor, which is Austin Davis, the Attorney General, Dave Sunday, victim advocate Marsha Grayson, prison specialist Harris Gubernick, and also psychiatrist Dr. John Williams. These 5 members will interview you on your public hearing, and if you are someone who has a life sentence, you need all 5 members to approve of your recommendation in order for your application to be sent to the governor for approval. If you are someone without a life sentence, you only need 3 of the 5 votes. So with that being said, the process in and of itself is you file the application first, which means you, the applicant, or the applicant's family or supporters, draft a narrative about the crime and the person's role in the crime, as well as explaining, their remorse for the crime. Once you have drafted your application and you have your supporting documents, which will include your home plan, if you have one at the time, or your letters of support, which could include job plans, housing, any sort of community resources. You will send all of those documents into the board. Once you send that in, you will receive a notification from the board that, number one, your application has been received, and then sometime later you will receive another notification from the board to say that your application has been filed. There used to be a timeline of 18 months for you to be able to receive the numbers stating that your application was filed. At this point, I don't know that there is a set timeline. I think every case is different, and with COVID, the timeline has kind of been pushed back. But I do believe that the board is trying to streamline a better process to get cases moving as quickly as they can, which for a lot of us is not as fast as it should be, but we can hope. After you send in your application, at some point within, I would say, a year and a half, you should be being staffed within the prison. And what that means is that people within DOC will start to work with you on your case and working with you to move along the process in order for you to have the next stage in front of the board. Those people are generally the unit manager. They could be deputies, they could be program specialists, basically anyone within DOC who has contact with you and who the superintendent's team will be helpful for you. I'm not sure if applicants have the ability to choose who is on their team, but I do know that the team does work extensively with the applicants. They will vote on them. They will interview them to make sure that they are meeting the steps necessary in order for them to be a successful candidate for commutation. The applicant does need the institutional support, so all of the members on their team will vote for them. And if they receive those votes, they have a better chance of getting commutation. None of the votes that they receive are an absolute until the final stage of the process. After the applicant is interviewed by the institutional staff, they then have an interview with the Secretary of DOC, who is currently Laurel Harry, and she will essentially do the same thing. They will have another interview about all of the facts of their case, and then hopefully they will get the votes from her, because it has been shown that if you do not have the DOC's recommendation, you will likely not make it past, the next point of the process, which is the merit review. Prior to you going to merit review, you will have to do a psychiatric evaluation. All of those things occur within the prison system, and all of that information is then sent to the board. That information is taken into account with the application, as well as the supporting letters or documents, the person's home plan. And from those documents, the board will then do a merit review. They will not speak to the applicant before that. They just go off of the documents that they receive. Again, if you are a lifer, you need 3 of the 5 votes in order for you to move past the merit review stage. If you're not a lifer, you just need 2 votes. If you are denied at merit review stage, you do have, or you can reapply within 12 months. After the merit review stage, then we come to the public hearing. This is the first time anyone on the board will have spoken to the applicant. The board members all interview the applicant. It's typically a 45-minute to an hour-long interview. The board members basically can ask anything that they deem important or appropriate. For us as supporters or legal, we typically do not enjoy the process. It is a very traumatic process for a lot of people because it is essentially akin to going to trial again. A lot of the topics are similar to what comes up if someone were to go to trial. So it is important for the person who is going up to be properly prepared, as much as they can be before they have their interview with the board. After you have your interview with the board, if you receive the 3 votes, like if you are someone without a life sentence, if you have 3 of the 5 votes, your application will be sent to the governor for him to sign off. If you are a lifer, you do need all 5 members, obviously, in order for your application to be sent to the governor. If you are a lifer, you will, in your sentence is commuted, you will be on parole for the rest of your life. A caveat to that would be if you are denied at the public hearing stage, you can file for a reconsideration or you can file a new application. If you are filing a new application, you do have to wait. I believe you can do an early review within 12 months. Otherwise, it would be a 2-year wait for you to reapply. And then I will kick it off to Brett.
All right. Thank you, Sabira. And thank you for co-panelists and everybody who's helped put this together. And I also want to recognize that I see in the room a lot of people that I recognize from over the years who are fighting for their loved ones and for others beyond the walls and who we've known in movement spaces, and a lot of people who have supported Mechie long before I ever knew her or ALC even existed. So definitely want to recognize that. I'm going to frame a little bit of the discussion around legal advocacy. We're going to move through the legal advocacy, community organizing, strategic communications, as Connie said. The Abolitionist Law Center approaches all of our cases, clients, projects from a movement lawyering perspective. What that means for us is that we are technicians, tacticians, and strategists for challenging institutional power. And when we are challenging institutional power, we do not merely rely on the law or lawyers or the courts. We know they're not trustworthy. We know that they are instruments of power, and we try to use these for ends that they were not ultimately created for. They were not created to support our movements, quite the opposite. So we do not kind of sanctify or lift up the role of lawyers in any respect, quite the opposite. And I wanted to start with that orientation because it framed how we approached supporting Mechie for commutation, but even years before, when we first represented Mechie, it was in a case challenging life without parole for felony murder. It was a civil case. Amistad were co-counsel on that one with us, called Scott versus Pennsylvania Board of Parole. And that case was itself really coming from the call that had originated and been, developing inside of the prison system by incarcerated people for decades, and then in more recent years led to the formation of the Coalition to Abolish Death by Incarceration, and was really calling on supporters outside the prison to be pushing to end death by incarceration sentences. And while that case was unsuccessful, it was very instrumental in pushing the issue forward and actually leading to the development of a case many of you are familiar with, the Derek Lee case, that's pending in front of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court right now. So it is in that context that we got to know Mechie and become inspired by her and worked with her. we learned about her case. And since 1973, she's been incarcerated for her role in a robbery in which her co-defendant took another person's life. Her co-defendant has long since been, several years ago released on parole because he was younger than 18 at the time of the offense. Mechie herself was 19 years old. And being a movement lawyer and organization where we build relationships with our clients, they endure beyond the mere legal case. So we, of course, had maintained communication with Mechie. We knew she was going up for commutation, and we heard in earlier in 2024 that she had been diagnosed with breast cancer. It was at that point that some of our initial advocacy began, but it was still quite informal and not very extensive. We were looking to try to expedite her review for commutation so that the Secretary of the Department of Corrections, Laurel Harry, would complete her review so that Mechie could be seen, we were hoping, in July of 2024 by the board. She had the support of State Correctional Institution Muncie for commutation. She just needed to be reviewed by the secretary. It's appeared like it should have been an easy lift. She'd been in 50 years. She had breast cancer. She had the support of the prison, and we well knew all of the other attributes, accomplishments, and the broad community support she had. Secretary Harry refused to expedite the process. She did not conduct the interview before the merit review in July. And she conducted the interview, I think it was around July or August, sometime in the summer, but she didn't actually complete her review or make a recommendation even before the November merit review session of the Board of Pardons. We reached out in December to legal counsel and were told the secretary still had not moved on Mechie's commutation. And it was on Christmas night that Mechie called and told me that she had been informed at the prison that Secretary Harry had refused to support her commutation. And it was right then at that moment that I understood that ALC and our movement, needed to be called upon to respond to Mechie. When the Secretary of Corrections doesn't support somebody for commutation, that means the Department of Corrections doesn't support the person for commutation, right? Their say is the ultimate say for the department. I'm not aware of anybody serving a death by incarceration sentence, at least in recent history, who has received a positive recommendation from the Board of Pardons for a commuted sentence, but did not have the secretary's recommendation. So I knew right away that this was going to be an uphill battle. And frankly, up until the vote was cast, I didn't think she was going to get it because of how arbitrary, reactionary, and inhumane the Board of Pardons typically is. Or at least can be in many cases, but it was the sort of fight that just on principle had to be had because Secretary Harry's decision was inexcusable. So we then mobilized internally within ALC and within a broader movement. And right away, I think the next day we were calling meetings to which many, many people, including many on this call, responded. And we were looking to use through kind of muscle memory the things that we've all learned how to do over the years as lawyers, as organizers, in reaching out to deploy every tactic that we could in order to become that force that Mechie spoke about, that would be able to show up for her the way that she has showed up for people in her community and for all of us over the years. So with that kind of framing of how we were approaching this really without any certainty or even likelihood of victory, and against really unfavorable odds without the secretary's support, decided that we were going to wage this campaign and move out really aggressively. And with that, I want to pass it back to Sabira, who can give some discussion now on some of the kind of nuts and bolts aspects of the commutation application process.
So what I will discuss is going to be the actually writing the application. For a lot of people who are going out for commutation, this is the first time in a very long time that they've discussed their crime. So it is important to be mindful of what you write within the application. But I will also say it is also like it's additionally important to be mindful of any prior statements you've given about your case, or any of the trial testimony. And I say that because a lot of people, when they get to the interview process with in front of the board, they come up against roadblocks because of a prior statement they may have made. So you kind of want to be thinking, even when you're writing your application, you want to be thinking about the things that happened in the past, because you want to be able to help the board understand why you may have said your prior statement, or like why your statement may be different if it is different. Like these are just things to be thinking about beforehand. It's always best to get in front of those type of issues before you are in front of the board of pardons. And a lot of people don't necessarily think about that because it's been so long for them since they've had to think about it. Um, when you are writing the narrative, or if you are helping someone write their narrative, it's very important to be as accurate as possible. Um, if you have an innocence claim, you do not have to change what your claim is. I tell people all the time that if you're saying you're innocent, say you're innocent. Don't try to say what you think they want to hear from you. Um, you know, you have to be as honest as possible, because the board will pick you apart if they think you are lying to them. Someone asked how long the narrative needs to be. I think it depends on what your story is and what you want to say to them. Um, I will say, if you are not prepared to answer or speak about something, you should not write it down in your narrative portion. Whatever you write down can be questioned on. So I would just be mindful of that. Um, what your narrative should entail is your crime, your role in the crime. If you didn't do it, you know, what circumstances were surrounding you at that time. I think that's helpful for a lot of people to do. Um, but then also speak about the remorse. A lot of people who have not committed the crime will speak about the way they were living their life at the time. So, and for them, they're not so much remorseful because they aren't the person who committed the crime, but they are remorseful for finding themselves in that sort of situation because of the way they were living. But if you are involved in the crime, this is the time that you absolutely have to show remorse. It's important to take accountability for your actions and don't try to deflect. If you are in a situation where you have a co-defendant, it's best not to spend too much time focus on them. The board will not typically focus on them. They want to hear about you and your actions and your reasonings. Um, yeah, I think a practical tip would be, before the application is filed, have someone proofread it to make sure what you're saying is accurate, if it matches up to, everything about the crime, and also it's exactly what you want to say. Some people, once they get to the interview process, they have it in their mind like, oh, I didn't mean to write that. But, you're years from that point now. You can't go back in time to change that. So it is important to be sure that what you say is what you want to say. And even if the person is not drafting it themselves, so say they have someone else drafting it for them, it's still best to read it to them and make sure that that's what they actually want to say. Just so they don't run up with issues later on. When you're writing the narrative, it's also best to be working on who your supporters may be, who you may get letters of support from, and what role they may serve. So some people are just there for emotional support. Other people may offer community resources like housing, employment, and if the applicant was a drug user or alcohol or whatever issues they may have had before going to prison, it's best to be planning for what it looks like if they come home. So oftentimes now the board does want to see that any sort of substance use or abuse or conditions are being treated in the community despite how long you've been sober. They don't, I mean, they consider sobriety within the prison instance, but for them, it would be doing a disservice to anyone to not have a plan set in place. It's also important to think about therapy just in general because a lot of people have decades away. So it may be best to try to plan for what it looks like when you are out on the street and dealing with the mental aspects that comes along with that. Um, yeah, and another practical way that people can help with um, the applicant is preparing them for the interview process. And Rupali will go into this a little bit more, but it is important that if you are going to help with preparing someone for the interview process, you are, I'd say stern, but that you are straightforward with them and you are actually going to get into difficult topics that may come up. And so I think with that, I can kick it to Rupali.
Thanks for that. And I just want to thank everyone else who's on this panel and a lot of people who are in the audience who are a big part of Michi's case and getting her here. Special shout outs to Ellen and Darlene of the Women Lifers Project, with Women Lifers Resume Project, Mary DeWitt, Emily and Lane from the Lifelines Project, and of course, Hope, who's here too. I saw her in the audience, but I just want to talk a little bit about the interview process for folks who are here to sort of benefit from some of the things we've learned in preparing clients to go through that process. I think, like Sabira mentioned, one of the most important things is to practice, is to find yourself with somebody possibly who's gone through this process before, a trusted friend, someone inside or outside, and have them practice questions with you. I mean, the number one objectives as you're going through the interview process or the goals are to make sure that you demonstrate genuine remorse, share your insights that you have about yourself and what you've learned, and demonstrate how you've transformed. So there's all kinds of questions that can be asked. And during the interview that takes place, you do have the right to have an attorney present if you have an attorney. But essentially, the questions are asked by different members of the board, usually via Zoom, and they're questions often about the narrative of the crime. They could be extremely specific. They might be questions about your state of mind whenever the crime happened. They might be questions about what happened, the sequence of events, whether or not there was a firearm, how many people were present in a room. You might be asked questions about comparing your culpability with that of co-defendants. So it's important to be prepared for questions like that. You could also be asked questions about insights, or things that you've learned, why you did what you did, or what you've learned, or how you've changed. And I think one question to always be prepared for is, why should your sentence be commuted? Um, During the interview, they could go into questions about your prison record, any misconducts, prior criminal history, um, and they also could get into mental health or addiction. So, like Sabira mentioned, it could be very important to have aspects of those addressed in some kind of a home plan, making sure that there is a counseling plan, and that you're ready for questions like, what kind of treatment do you need? How did drugs or alcohol influence what might have happened, and what triggers might you have? Another thing to sort of be prepared about is questions about whether or not um, your brain development might have impacted what happened, especially if you were older at the time that the crime happened. And I think another big thing that can come up is remorse, being asked questions like whether or not you think your conviction was fair, what you might say to the victims and any past contact that was had, whether or not an apology letter was sent. So I think those are some of the things to be prepared for, and generally, good advice going into this is making sure that you answer the questions honestly and you're able to represent the ways that you have transformed. The interview is anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour. There's a question that was asked. I just want to note that there are some difficult contradictions to overcome during the interview process, and one is whether or not you might be questioned about having an ongoing PCRA. So, if you are litigating any post-conviction appeals close in time to the time that you have had that you are applying for a commutation of your sentence, that is something that could come up. And you might be asked a question like, why did you appeal your sentence as recent as a few years ago? Are you accepting responsibility for your actions? And so you should be prepared to address anything like that. And, you know, um, like Sabir mentioned, if you're maintaining your innocence, to be prepared to explain that honestly and know that anything you say in the interview, in the same way that you make any statement, could be used against you if you're maintaining your innocence for a post-conviction appeal. So I am going to pass it over to a colleague, but first I wanted to mention in terms of putting together and submitting an application. Um, in addition to the ultimate application that gets submitted, you can get letters of support from others, and our organizing team is going to speak a little bit about what that process is like. One other thing we were able to offer in Michi's case was a letter from a doctor. So, for individuals who are facing medical issues, it could be important for the board to understand what those medical issues are, the care that's being received, and where there might be gaps in that care, and how a person might be able to access care that's appropriate in the community as well. So, if folks on here haven't heard of the Medical Justice Alliance, I just want to shout them out. They work with attorneys. And so, if attorneys are able to get medical records, they can offer doctors and their assistants pro bono to review records and possibly submit letters. So, that's just another idea if anyone is facing some kind of medical issues. So, I will pass it over to Brett to talk a little bit about sort of the political aspect of what could be helpful in submitting a package.
Okay, yeah, I think I'm supposed to be queued up here to talk about some of the political support we had for Michi. And let's see, what did we have for Michi? I mean, we had Representative Rick Krajewski, we had Philadelphia City Council member Kendra Brooks, we had State Representative Andre Edmonds. I'm not sure I'm going to remember all of them. Kendra went the extra mile and organized a number of her colleagues as well to create a video then to put on social media supporting Michi's commutation. The Speaker of the House, Joanna McClinton, also spoke up for Michi. Now, it's not necessarily going to be the case that you're going to be able to get elected officials to step forward in every particular case or very many of them, but it can be important. And a number of people in our movement have made connections with elected officials, whether it's lobbying for legislation to end death by incarceration or on other issues. If that's something you're looking to bring to bear in support of your loved one or somebody you're assisting, then try to reach out to people who may have used that approach in the past. And even if you haven't, in order to get advice, to get tips on how to approach them, how to frame outreach. But politicians can provide political cover for the board. It sends a message not only that there are other people paying attention to the board's decision in this case, but it indicates to board members that there's been sufficient agitation and lobbying from people in support of the applicant, that they know how to reach political figures, right? So that's something that registers with them. And for politicians, if you can't, even if you don't have experience, even if nobody's given you any advice on how to do this before, don't be hesitant about reaching out to those who are within the district where the person is coming from or somebody that's close to you. Contact them, especially if you're a constituent, and explain to them why it's important that the person you're supporting for gets the support of the Board of Pardons. It can be a very um, small ask and easy for a politician to do. And one thing to keep in mind about politicians is if you are able to tell them in very concise, bullet pointed fashion why this is important, why commutation supports public policy that they're in support of, whether it's second chances legislation maybe they have backed, whether it's support for community reentry or helping people connect with their families after incarceration, or maybe somebody has a medical issue or a psychiatric or physical disability, and disability justice is something that's the politicians on record being supportive of. Find whatever the angle is to approach them, to lay out why this is important in the information that really presents a concise and compelling narrative, and be prepared to work with their staff to draft what it is that you want them to work with and add to. And if you make it really easy for them, it's much more likely that they're going to be able to be supportive, and it's usually something that does not or that might not cost them. It depends on a lot of factors, the specifics of the case, and of course of the politician themselves. But that's just something that we have built as a movement over the years, increasing connections with elected officials. So passing legislation is um, extremely difficult, and you need majorities in the state house. And while we're building towards that power to be able to make structural change, call on those who already support us to get involved in these individual cases and to take stands in support of our people. With that, I think I'm passing it back to Sabira, right? About home plans?
So a part of this process is obviously having a good home plan. Um, for the board, it doesn't need to be a concrete home plan. It just means like as long as you're thinking about the next steps and you have something in play or you have people who can help you get your plan situated for when you are released, I feel like that's enough for the board. But I will also say there's never a thing as too much of a home plan. So if you have like multiple housing options, I would put them in. If you have multiple job opportunities, I would put those in. If you know people who have businesses and they may be willing to give someone a job, once they are released, you can use that as an employment plan as well. Like it literally does not have to be concrete, but as long as you can use your resources to say, we have community support and they'll be able to support in substantial ways. That's a good thing for the board to have. And also, community resources like drug treatment. You can call around for people if they're inside, if you can be the one reaching out to treatment places to see what it looks like if they do decide to get treatment at any of the facilities. You can also reach out to try to find whatever resources they may need when they come home. Some people have medical issues, setting them up with doctors or making sure they have access to get to whatever treatments they may need. Those are things that the board will take into consideration pretty heavily. I will say that sometimes the board does not ask you those questions, so you don't often know if your home plan is a good one. But I would just say be as over prepared as you can be when it comes to your home plan. And if there are some areas that you need work on, that's fine because you will have time. Like if you are released, you do have time to work on building those home plans up. But as long as you are, actively working to get that situated, the applicant will be in a better position.
Thank you so much, Sabira and Rupali and Brett. So we're going to wrap up the legal section of this and move on to organizing. But if you have additional questions from anything you heard during the legal portion, please feel free to put those in the chat or hold on to your question. We'll try to leave time at the end. So with that, I will pass to Etta and Sam.
Hi, everyone. I'm Etta. I live in Pittsburgh, and um, I just want to say that every commutation applicant that has the pleasure of being represented and supported by everybody who has spoken. I'm just really, you guys are a gift. Anytime I hear that y'all are on somebody's team, I'm so happy because I just know that they're in the best hands. Um, so I've been working on the commutation issue for so long that it's hard for me to know where to start sometimes. Um, but just a little background and gonna stay focused on community organizing. Definitely came to it through Avis Lee's. I think I jumped on her fourth attempt at commutation. She applied 5 times, I believe. She really taught us about the process, and it was through using her um, attempts at freedom that we learned the process and tried to expand it to help us all learn. And then, as you get a phone call from Ellen from the Women's Lifers Resume Project, and she's writing applications, and then you meet Celine, and she's doing stuff, and there's all these individual advocates that are spending so much time and support helping people with their applications. So one of just a couple of the resources that we do have a commutation kit, which is like a resource that we send out. And I think there's a link that people can post to it. That I can't wait to add some of the tips I just learned from Sabira and Rupali on the interviews into the next kit. The process is always changing. So in order to keep up with that, we started a group that's we called the Commutation Working Group, and it's a statewide group of people who care about commutations, whether that's like they had somebody in the process or just longtime advocates. And we meet once a month and try to keep track of the ever-changing policies. Like, they've been saying that they're going to put the application online now for like since 2020. So that was like Fetterman's one of his big things that he wanted to do. And it is online. There is links online, but it's still not online for incarcerated applicants. You can fill it out and print it out. It's getting easier, but it's still not there yet. But there's just these things are always changing. So we try to stay up on the policies and then update our commutation kit so we can support through people through the process. So there's that group that's been meeting for 4 years and continues to meet. And then there's also we have a new group that's the PA. It's like we're calling it the like direct Board of Pardons Direct Action Group. And so this group tries not to parse all the problems, but really tries to focus on the actions with the problems. So we've been around for 1 year motivated. I think it's been a year, motivated just by the no's, the constant no's. Like we have the applicants, they have everything. They have a bajillion years in, they have a clean record, they check all the boxes that there's, and they're still getting no's. And just tired of being afraid of the Board of Pardons, tired of thinking like, oh, if I publicly criticize them and I wrote a letter for someone, that they're going to vote no on them. And that's like a form of control that the Board of Pardons has over us. So the Board of Pardons Direct Action Group is really trying to be public about it and unafraid in demanding change and reform. And so we have a petition online. So we're called the Commutation Now group. We're the Board of Pardons Direct Action Group, but the public website is Commutation Now. We have a petition that has over 1,000 signatures on it. Petition is an organizing tool, so we took our 1,000 signatures and wrote them all out and hand delivered them dramatically to the governor's office. And we also hand delivered our report about the psychiatrist Williams, who we want to dethrone. We would love for the psychiatrist, Dr. Williams, to lay down his judiciary judgment position and let somebody else have a chance to dole out mercy and compassion and trauma-informed questioning. So we have this report. That group hand delivered it. If you all want to join these organizations, I'll put my individual email list and we can connect through there. But thinking specifically about like the individual commutation case as a part of community organizing, it's like when I think about Mechie and how easy it was for there to be a mass mobilization for her, it was because she had already spent the years and years that Jules noted, like building the trust with us. So if you have an incarcerated loved one who has a life sentence, please get them in contact with our organizing, because it's through them building the relationship with other people, um and not being discouraged if we take a long time to respond, or like not giving, it's like I'm saying all the time, don't give up on, like, we're not giving up on you, please don't give up on us either, because there's a lot of mail, there's a lot of people that need resources. There's only a limited amount of we can do, and commutation is like winning the lottery. It's very, very hard to get. And it's incredible that Mechie and all this community organizing really, like what Sarah was saying in the chat, like the organizing that happened. So like, and Sam's going to talk about the letters, but like those letters that we sent to the head of the Department of Corrections saying that we disagreed with um her decision, all of those, like, I don't even know if she read them. They just forward them directly to the Board of Pardons. So that was like basically hundreds of letters that went through the Department of Corrections to the Board of Pardons, basically saying, like, we support this person. Um, Sam, you want to talk more about the letters?
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about some of the specific things we were doing to support Mechie and not really garner community support, but coordinate it. And I say coordinate because I want to reiterate that Mechie did all of this work through her lifelong relationships, the incredible justice work that she's done, and just like her heart for others. And if anyone has the privilege and honor of getting to talk to Mechie, she is just a joy and an incredible human being to be around. And so really all I had to do was get people together. One of the biggest things that I worked on was around coordinating letter writing. And so the Abolitionist Law Center, Philly Muslim Freedom Fund, and the Human Rights Coalition have a monthly letter writing night every on Thursday evenings. And so we had people write Mechie letters of support, and we also contributed in writing some of those letters to Shapiro around Mechie getting stopped from the secretary. And then we also had abolitionist comrades reach out and say, hey, we really want to support Mechie and we want to put together a fundraiser. We want to do an abolitionist trivia. And so that was another community event where people got to get together. We raised money, had a good time. Hope, who is again in this room, spoke and also organized a bunch of families and friends to come to that event as well. And it also just raised the profile of the campaign. And then finally, which was one of my favorite things to do, we gathered support letters for Mechie to the Board of Pardons. And so we had dozens of heartfelt, just incredible letters of support for Mechie. These were folks who were just touched by Mechie, who would talk to me at like 9 p.m. after their work shift to tell me how Mechie had changed their life, how much they still thought about her, and how they were willing to support her transition in coming home, which is so important in these support letters. And I also want to mention that these folks were already, again, organized by Mechie because they were like, we know and love you and we want to support you and write these support letters for you. And also organized from the outside by Avis Lee and Dana Lomax, who provided so many folks that I could reach out to alongside Brett and Quinn, and some other folks who also reached out. And one of the things that really helped this get along was also that we had a template. And so we were able to kind of like send a guide to people. So if they had never written a support letter before, they could kind of follow the guide and figure out how to like, what are the components that the Board of Pardon is really looking for in the support letter. And then we also work to support people while they're writing those letters. So for some people, they wanted to do handwritten letters. Other people wanted to transcribe what they were telling me verbally. And that is sort of like the letters portion of how we got together community support for Mechie. And now I'm going to turn it over to Connie and Jules, who are going to, Etta, go ahead.
I just had one more tip um, for support, like family members on the outside who are testifying on behalf of their beloveds. Um, it's really encourage anybody to like talk to an outside person and help walk them through like what to expect. And I just posted the link to all the public hearings. I always direct people to go watch the public hearings so they know what to expect from the Zoom. And I think his name was Louis Pagan. His family was the first family I saw do this. So back in the day when the public hearings were in person, supporters would show up, they would have the same color t-shirt, they called the name, we would all stand up and it would be like you would feel the support in the room. Zoom has taken that away from us. We don't have that anymore, but we are advocating to get the put the public back in public hearings, but there different family members have done different things and I think it's been pretty effective. If you go and watch those, you can get different examples, but to amass first, I mean, just basically have them practice too. Just like you have the applicant practice, have that person practice, write out their statement, practice on the Zoom saying what they want to say. But then also, I love the model of having members, family members or friends stand behind whoever the spokesperson is to just visibly show that support. And it's just it's an organizing tool to try to show support.
Thank you so much, Etta and Sam. So for the final kind of component of this campaign, um, Jules and I are going to talk very briefly about the role of comms, strategic communications. I want to start by just re-uplifting something that Mechie said in her message earlier, when she said it's important for the DOC to see that we have a force like a freight train. And so all of these components really came together to create that force. And really all comms did was like leverage all of this incredible work by organizing, by legal, by people who have been working with Mechie, with Mechie's um, contributions to her own freedom. So we just kind of leveraged all of that. And I just want to uplift a little bit that one of the most critical components of the strategic communication strategy was to get as much press coverage as possible. So broadly, that's always the case in communications. You know, you want to get the attention of the press because getting others to tell your story for you typically boosts both visibility and credibility of whatever story you're trying to tell. But particularly for Mechie, the press coverage was particularly powerful because politicians read and care about what the media says, and it can truly influence some of their decision making. And I think, as Brett was talking about earlier, contributed to some of the reasons that some of the politicians ended up advocating strongly and visibly for Mechie. Um, and in this case, of course, it's always a puzzle, you know, how to attract press attention. In this case, ALC was able to leverage relationships with reporters built over almost a decade. So reporters that not only know us and the work that we do, but also they have an understanding of the messaging and the framing that we have pushed for, we meaning the movement, right? We have pushed for over the years. And when they cover incarcerated people, always insisting on the humanity of incarcerated people and always uplifting the need for second chances. So, you know, after years of that kind of messaging and shaping, we got some wins, some big wins with reporters like Ellie Rushing and Daniel O, who had previous experience covering these kind of issues to really do a really deep dive, particularly that beautiful feature in the Philly Inquirer that also featured Hope. It was a really beautiful story. It was very human. It was a human story. So that was particularly powerful in this campaign. And with that, I'm gonna turn it over to Jules.
Yeah, I mean, you all really cover so much of this. I'll just say briefly that one point of emphasis, I think, around when we're doing narrative work around commutation, we are really using this as a way to say, like, this arduous, opaque process that takes people 5 or 6 years to apply once, and then many applying 4 or 5 times. That's 20 or 25 years of their life. Like, this is the only pathway home right now for the 5,300 people sentenced to die in prison in Pennsylvania. So we are really focused on commutation in part because each person matters, but also because we want to draw attention to the larger issue, which is that no human being should be put in a cage for 60, 70 years. And that all of us, we've all changed since we were like 19 or 20 or 21, and we want everybody to have the opportunity to go before a parole board to make their case for a second chance. And we're always using this, even when we talked with Mechie about doing a big campaign around her and her application for commutation. She was like, I will do it if you insist on drawing attention to the broader issue and the broader movement that like nobody should be in these cages like we are. And so I think like in this work we've done with reporters over the last decade, many decades, we're always kind of like centering our commutation message within these broader messages about the need for second chances and insisting on the humanity of everybody in our movement, including those who started it behind prison walls. I guess the last thing I'll say about our strategic communications on this campaign is that, so much of this is about community and so much of this is about you all and like all the people that you know in this movement. And those relationships and sort of deep partnerships over the years lay the groundwork for us to have these big moments. I think about like when the child lifers came home. We're like, oh my gosh, there's this huge moment. Like 600 people are coming home in Pennsylvania. But that was just the result of like decades of work and decades of community building and relationships. And so Mechie coming home is similar. We were able to quickly reach out to over 50 organizations, both across the state of Pennsylvania and nationwide, to sign on to a letter to Shapiro that was basically just outlining how all of his stated values should culminate in him supporting her bid for commutation and just using his own words to say, we know that you believe in second chances. We know that you, et cetera, et cetera. So that was just like incredible to see so many people immediately like, yes, yes, add our voice, for them to call the governor, for them to organize their own, campaigns to write in to the Board of Pardons. And, so many of you on this call, like the Women's Lifers Resume Project, ACLU, Center for Constitutional Rights. It was just like really cool to see so many people coming together and saying like, we're all in for Mechie. And then one last thing I'll say is that we did a Mechie Monday social media campaign just to kind of create a rhythm around like every Monday, we're going to have another action that you can join in on, that you can boost to your community. And that was a way for people to just have like an easy way to uplift this and keep it on the radars of reporters who are following all of you, all of us, and to keep it on the radar of elected officials and lawmakers as well, and just all the people that were really like galvanized by this movement. And so with that, we are going to kick it over to Etta once again for like a couple ways that you can help right now, Mechie in particular, and then also the broader campaign to bring folks home.
Thank you. Okay, so we started a welcome home fund for Mechie. Let's Get Free has been experimenting with guaranteed basic income for women coming home with long sentences for about 4 years now. And we're trying to do it for Mechie. So we're ultimately trying to raise 6,000 or more dollars that can be distributed on a monthly basis every the first year that she's home. So it's like a steady income. And I think they're going to drop a link in the chat. So there's that. But there's also, if you haven't signed our petition on the Commutation Now website, it really will take a second. It might not feel like you're doing too much, but it's meaningful and we appreciate it. If you want to get involved in the Commutation Strategy Working Group or the Commutation Now campaign, you can email me. Also, the Coalition to Abolish Death by Incarceration is going on a statewide tour in Pennsylvania. And it's the Cadby Caravan. And our motto is, you are not alone, and we can't do it without you. And we really need to re-energize, rejuvenate, and uplift ourselves. Like, I'm really doing it for me. I'm doing it for me. I'm participating for me because I need to be energized. It's hard to stay in this. It's hard to stay in this. It's hard to stay, even if you have like a special loved one. It's hard to stay in it. It's a lot. It's relentless. So we're going on a 7 city tour starting in Pittsburgh, Erie, State College, Scranton, Lancaster, Chester, and ending in Philadelphia. We're going to be showing films along the way, and building movements, talking to people. So come out to that and join CADB, join our groups. And you guys better write your letters about Williams. Mr. Dr. Williams, this is forget everything else I said. This is the most important thing. And I think it's the hardest for people to do is actually sit down and write their own letter. Senator Bartolotta, we're doing a postcard campaign. We're sending in postcards to all the Senate Judiciary Committee are the people, and the governor are the people who actually decide. They're the main decision makers in the Board of Pardons. They have 6-year terms. They're up for election every 6 years. Not election, they're up for nomination every 6 years. And that's just the 3 members that aren't the elected officials. So there's lieutenant governor, attorney general, and then there's the victim's advocate, the doctor, psychiatrist, and then the criminal justice expert. So those 3 seats we could kind of have a community say over. Please write letters about him. Please organize a group that you know to write a letter about him. Call a judiciary committee member. Tell them we want a new Board of Pardons person. And yes, I will use all the air quotes I can. The double crunch about Goober Nick.
Thank you so much, Etta, for those timely calls to action. And just as a reminder, I know there have been a lot of links flying around in the chat as we send up a follow-up with both the link to this webinar so that you can share with folks. We will also include all of the links that were shared in the chat here. So don't worry if you didn't quite catch all of them. You'll have another opportunity. Now, at this time, I'd love to open up the floor for questions. I know a lot were covered in the in the chat, excuse me. And also, if there are any questions for Hope directly, I know Hope, you had mentioned that you would be willing to answer questions specifically. Did we answer them all? Hope, would you like to say anything? Not to put you on the spot. Okay, I see in the chat, I see Millie has a question. What is the best timing for submitting additional letters of support? Who wants to take that?
I can
Sabira.
take that.
Yeah.
Um, I think if the person is at the merit review stage, it's best to try to get it within a few weeks of that hearing. If they're coming up on the public hearing stage, again, it's like as early as possible, but I believe that if you get it in within 2 weeks, I would say 2 to 3 weeks, that should be a sufficient enough time. But as early as you can get them in, try to get them in.
And just to add to that, a lot of times the letters get old. So you can write a letter and sometimes the energy ebbs and flows. So if people have a lot of energy to like organize people to write support letters, you shouldn't say no, wait till the end. I would advocate go ahead and write your letter and then try to get it refreshed. For a recent hearing that happened, there was a letter that was like 2 years old, and I just wrote a letter that was like, my support still stands. Here's the original letter. Um, And I remember when Celeste Trusty was the secretary of the Board of Pardons, she was always saying like, pack, you can add things. Did you guys, I'm sorry if I'm being redundant. You can add things to the packet because there's such a long time before you actually go up for a hearing. If you have a new accomplishment or if you have something significant that happens, add that to your application. Like you completed a new class or a new success thing. Um, she was always saying like pack it in, add it, send it to the secretary of the board for your packet. Jane has a
Awesome.
question.
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
I'm just reading the chat out loud. Does the Board of Pardons not accept support letters until the application is filed? I think they put it in the packet. It's like, and correct me if I'm wrong, they add everything to this packet when the board reads it. It's probably right around the merit review hearing or right around the public hearing.
Yeah, I don't know specifically if you're asking the question before the person actually files their application. I'm not sure how the board will handle those types of letters of support. But once the person has filed their application, I'm pretty sure you can just send in support letters as they go.
I've written letters for my niece who has submitted her application, but they've rejected the letter saying that the application hasn't been filed yet, and said to hold on to the letters until the application is filed.
I don't I don't know. I'll try to get clarification on that and I can send that to Kanis or whoever is going to send out the emails to give some clarification because I'm not sure. I think this is the first time I've heard about letters of support being rejected.
Okay, there's another question in the chat from Millie. Can people write letters to the board to change rep/reps through party outside? Etta, go ahead.
That would just be writing the secretary of the Board of Pardons. If you want to change, if the incarcerated person wants to change their representative, they write the Board of Pardons directly and say like, I want this person to be a representative or I have a change in my representative.
Okay, great. Another question, is the merit hearing, and I'm reading these because I don't think everybody can see the chat. So is the merit hearing the one with interviews? Is this hearing a private one?
Merit review has no interviews of the applicants. It has no advocacy for or against any application. It is a public hearing, so to speak, where the board members simply record their votes on each application, as to whether or not they advance to the public hearing stage.
Okay, next question from Cheryl Price. How much time is required to be served or recommended before a commutation applicant can be submitted?
So
I can speak on this. Or Sabira, you unmuted. Go, you want to talk?
no, you can if you want to. I'll jump in if there's anything I need to add.
It's just like this question has haunted us for our whole lives. There's nothing written down that says you have to serve this much time before you apply, but there's all these unwritten rules. And like when I first got involved, the unwritten rule was 20 years. But now I feel like it's getting more. Like it's like the unwritten rule is like the age is going up, but there's technically, what I know, there's nothing written. People say don't even try before 20. Now it seems like it's going up.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I would say if you have less than 25 years, it doesn't make sense for you to apply. But if you can get, unfortunately, to say it like that, but people have better success if they have more years in. So I would say currently the number is more close to 30.
Also, you got to factor that it's like 5 to 6 years before your application actually makes it that far.
Yeah. So 25 years is a good starting point.
I always say though, I don't know. It's like my people who came home filed like 5 and 6 times. I don't know. There's something to be said about persistence and like I don't know. But then the thing is when you file the application, from my understanding, like your first rejection, you have to wait a year before you file again, and then your second rejection, you have to wait 2 years. So I don't know. It's hard. This is a hard process to get out. It's a hard process to get out of.
It looks like we may have had a follow-up from Kathy's question about the merit hearings. Um, Kathy wants to know if advocates can attend the merit hearings.
Like they're all Zoom now, right? So attending just means watching on the computer. I don't think they have them public.
Right.
Person.
But a
You can
strategy
attend.
that we've talked about is like anybody can be a representative. Like you want Rupali or Sabiro to be your representative. You want a lawyer to be if you have one, but anybody can be a representative. So when you're a representative, you can go into that interview and kind of be an advocate. I mean, I would take direction from Sabira and Rupali and the others who have been in those interviews, but like, and you could, as far as I know, if you're a representative, you can get the special link and testify at the hearing. I'm looking in your faces to see if I'm right.
Yeah, I just want to add that I think that's right. Yeah, that you can have an advocate, be present for your interview, but also for the hearing, can say some words on your behalf.
Is that for the public hearing, but not the merit review?
Yes.
Do we have any more questions? Um,
Millie has a question.
okay.
She says, my son has 28 to 70-year sentence where no one was hurt, no priors. He has been in over 22 years now. He has 12 years. He's over, I don't know, I'm confused.
Yeah, I think the comment on or the question about how long somebody should serve before applying, like the response is all, I think, assumed but didn't state that if you're talking about somebody serving life without parole, doesn't make sense to be seeking commutation after a certain until you've served a certain amount of that. And I think that calculation can be different if you have a different sentence structure. And the facts that you laid out there, 28 to 70. Now he's been in over 22 years. It could be pretty easy for the board to say parole eligibility is in a few more years, but also nobody's hurt, no prior. If he has institutional support, it could also be not a big consequence for them, for the board to just commute the sentence and essentially make him eligible for parole sooner. And with a sentence of 28 to 70, only he would only need 3 of the 5 members to recommend a commutation, not all 5 that is required if they're serving life without parole. So based on that limited information, 28 to 70, been in over 22 years, I don't think there'd be any harm. And if an application were filed now, I mean, by the time it's actually considered, it would be even closer to 28, given the multiple years of waiting it takes. Edda says go for it. So
22 years is nothing to sneeze at. That is a grown child. That is that is a lot.
Okay. We are 1 minute to time. Any parting words from any of our panelists? Any final questions? There's one more from Kathy. Can we squeeze that in? Is it true that a person can get out when they have served 85% of their minimum if approved?
How do you mean get out? I mean, if we're talking commutation, the sentence can be reduced, by going through this process, even if you've served 1 year of the sentence. If you mean, can a person be paroled from a sentence when they have not reached their minimum in Pennsylvania, the answer is no, not without sentence commutation.
Okay.
Yes, you recall a lawyer mentioned this at a hearing. I don't know who the lawyer was, but we'd be well advised to double and triple check everything the lawyers tell us.
Well, I have a question for the panel of experts. How much do you know about people who aren't, I mostly just follow the life sentencers or really long terms. Have you heard much commutation for other lengths of sentences?
I mean, whenever there's those summaries that you provide, right, or Let's Get Free and others that are tracking what happens each hearing, um, that's where I get most of my information, and I just don't see a lot of people who aren't serving life without parole seeking commutation. I don't know what sort of data there is on it. It would be interesting to see. And there's also a lot of people in Pennsylvania who have very long, what they call term of year sentences. So they don't have a life at the end of it, and they do have minimal dates, but their minimums are 20, 25, 30 years. We have clients who have had 50 plus year minimums, but I just have not familiar with that many of them going in front of the board to seek commutation.
Okay, and I think that's going to be our last word for the night. Thank you again to everybody for taking the time to join us and to all be in community to help win more freedom for more people. Please stay on the lookout for the follow-up email with the links and the recording of this webinar. And thank you all. Good night.